Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Lang, and I am doing the Youth Exploring Climate Science program presentation, starting with the Biodiversity unit. You can see this slide deck exists on Google Drive, and I will put a link to it in the document. So this mock presentation is meant to capture how I would usually use this slide deck in the classroom with students. Usually I will make a copy of the slide deck and change it for what the teacher has talked about as priority information or like learning challenges that their students that we want to prioritize for their students. So you'll see in this slide deck, there's some sentence prompts, like sentence framing prompts, as well as like a guide to which question we're on. And that was after talking to the teacher, understood what the students need and what they usually expect to see on slide decks in the classroom. So yeah, at the beginning of the presentation, I usually make sure the slide deck is up, make sure students have whatever document they're using to follow along. There's a structured document for students to use called the Youth Exploring Climate Science Work Along worksheet for students. And teachers will like to use that as an attendance metric for the day. And so while you're doing the presentation, you're just reminding students which question we're helping them answer and giving them time to write down their thoughts too. It can be either digitally or in a physical sense. You can print out the worksheet or have them follow along through Google Drive. Okay, so again, my name is Camille Lang, and I'm doing the Youth Exploring Climate Science presentation. This one is the biodiversity presentation. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Camille Lang. I'm here to talk about this unit that exists within the county's Office of Sustainability called Youth Exploring Climate Science. I usually would ask students to guess what they think we're going to talk about today to get them verbalizing with me. And they say climate science because I just told them we're going to talk about climate science. I spend priority explaining myself. This is just a personal preference and something I think that helps students understand the workforce that it takes to address climate change. So on this slide, I would say my name's Camille Lang. I am a sustainability specialist with San Mateo County's Office of Sustainability. The Office of Sustainability is a government entity that serves all of San Mateo County, not just one city or town like Daly City, where I was giving this presentation. Instead, we're making sure that everyone that lives in this near area to you, from Daly City down to Redwood City, out to Half Moon Bay and into Foster City and the places that touch the San Francisco Bay and the Pacific Ocean. We help make sure everyone has the resources that they need to take on climate action and live sustainably for future generations. I went to Humboldt State University, and my degree is in environmental education and interpretation. I also have a minor in marine science. The main degree that I got was called an environmental management protection degree. So this degree, I thought I was going to work at a state park talking about whales all day in California. And I ended up moving back home after college and started working at some of my favorite places to do field trips when I was a student here. I moved back to do some of the field trips. The photo you can see there is of me holding a shovel-nosed guitarfish. I was working at the Marine Science Institute before this role. And at the Marine Science Institute, that was a place that I grew up going on field trips to. It helped me understand and see what was below the surface of the San Francisco Bay. And so although this place is our home, I encourage you to stay curious because we don't know everything about these places. And there's really beautiful things hidden just below the surface, like the shovel-nosed guitarfish, which is halfway between a shark and a ray. You can see the nose on this fish. That's what it's named after, is its weird nose that it uses to dig into the mud at the bottom of the bay and grab invertebrates or things without a backbone. So that's a little bit about me. If you have questions about that, I'd be happy to talk about it more, but let's get into it. These are my goals for us by the 2 presentations and field trip. That's what I'm saying. By the end of the week, we usually do 2 presentations and a field trip. By the end of that session, students will be able to identify and explain climate change's impact on San Mateo County, how climate change impacts biodiversity, and what solutions we can work on together to make a positive change for both the planet and the living and non-living things on the planet. Does that sound like a deal? Students say yes, and then we get into it. I remind students that these are the materials we need for class. Some teachers don't want to use this student handout, and that's okay. I just delete that slide from their presentation. It's just checking in with the teacher to see what do students need to make sure that the teacher has something to grade for them if they want that, and how to follow along and stay engaged during the presentation. So there's a link to the YEC student handout on this slide. The teacher has already received that material and has either printed it out or put it on their Google Classroom kind of situation for students to follow along. All right, so now that everyone has their materials open and we're ready to go, I would invite you to first pause and reflect. Think about this question and write down your answer. In question number 1 on your student handout. What impacts might humans have on all living and non-living things or the biodiversity on our planet? And you can see this slide has a 2-minute timer. You have to hit play and then it'll do the timer for you. This is helpful for students to know how much time they have. And then you can see also this other prompt on this slide that says when the timer goes off, you should be finished up and quiet, ready to share. So once it gets to 2 minutes, this one is loud. I actually need to change this, but this is what it sounds like. And so students know that it's time to like shift the gears into sharing. I ask students to raise their hands. And usually students don't want to talk to me, especially this early on in meeting me. So we do like think, pair, share. So they've been already thinking, they wrote it down, and then they're going to turn to someone nearby, someone in their table group. Usually students are grouped up in tables, and they can share what impacts humans have. Students navigate between like really starting off very negative of humans have ruined the planet, humans have killed a lot of animals, we remove a lot of plants to make sure that we have homes. And then when we talk kind of like about those classic more the impacts that come to the front of the mind, I ask students like, well, is it all bad? And do humans only have a negative impact? And students eventually say like, no, I pick up trash in my neighborhood. And so just making sure that you get the whole breadth of impact. If students don't get there, I usually share like the comeback story of the Monterey Bay as a positive impact humans had on the natural world, maybe a place that they've been to. If you don't know about the positive impact humans have made on the Monterey Bay, in the 70s, that area was used for canning, and there was a lot of excess waste going into the Monterey Bay. And it was creating a very limited species diversity where the only animals that were able to survive were urchins. Urchins eat kelp. And so the kelp forest that used to be there was just a desolate range of a bunch of urchins. People started getting concerned about the sea otter population around the same time too, because sea otters live in the kelp and that's where they get most of their food. And so when people like the Monterey Bay Aquarium started protecting sea otters and spending more time reaching out to people and educating them on the unique ecosystem that's the kelp forest in the Monterey Bay, more laws and legislation was passed. And so now this area is thriving. You can go to the Monterey Bay and see a wide species diversity. When people learn a little bit more, they come up with a strategy to protect and have more and spend more time sharing what they know with the people around them, we can see more of a positive impact. So that's just like some idea, or that's an idea that resonates with me and just something I've grown up seeing in my lifetime living in the Bay Area, but just making sure that people understand that yes, innately you're going to go to the negative impacts humans have on the planet. Like we're talking about climate change today. So, but it's not all bad, and there's room for us to know a little bit more and care a little bit more when we do that. Okay. So after students have shared, we've talked about it. I say, all right, kick back, relax, make sure you're following along in your student workbook. I'm going to give you an overview about what climate change is. Okay, now I'm really just going to go into teacher mode and talk about it all. All right, so we can't talk about climate change until we talk about the greenhouse gas effect. This is like the first thing that you see maybe people talking about if you're scrolling through an article that says like, what is climate change? Why am I concerned about it? You can see this, everything I'm giving to you on this slide will help you answer question 2 in your student workbook. And you can see that on this slide here. So what is this image showing us? You can see that there's this little bubble around our planet, and that's called our atmosphere. Now, if you look outside, can you see the atmosphere? No, it's a clear bubble. And so that bubble is really, really important because it traps in heat from the sun. So that way it's warm enough on our planet for us to live here. Different planets like Mars, Jupiter don't have an atmosphere that works like this, and we can't live there. The planet needs to be a certain temperature for humans to be able to survive and all the other living and non-living things on our planet. The atmosphere is essential for us to survive here. But when things start getting out of proportion is when humans are emitting CO2 and other harmful greenhouse gases that are getting trapped in our atmosphere for not just like a couple days, not a couple weeks, but over 100 years. And so when we see more human activity causing greenhouse gases to burn, it's all getting trapped in our atmosphere, and that's causing our planet to warm up faster than expected. These are some of the sources of greenhouse gases. Looking at this slide, who can tell me what the most common greenhouse gas is in the atmosphere? Students will say carbon dioxide, and I say, yes, exactly right. You can see about 82% of the greenhouse gases that are trapped in our atmosphere right now in the United States are estimated to be CO2 or carbon dioxide. Other amounts, or there's other lesser amounts of other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, like methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. Does anyone know what methane is? And sometimes we get to cow farts, sometimes we don't. And I say, yes, it is cow farts, but it's also what happens naturally when our food scraps start breaking down in a landfill. So if you don't compost or put your food scraps in that green bin, if they go into the gray bin and end up in the landfill, they naturally, when they're breaking down in a landfill setting, they release methane. And methane, although there's only 10% of methane in our atmosphere compared to carbon dioxide, it is 84 times more potent or stronger and has more of an impact than carbon dioxide. So having this much carbon dioxide and even 10% of methane in our atmosphere is having huge impacts on our planet. Before we start thinking about these impacts, I want to talk about what is causing all of this extra CO2, methane, other greenhouse gases to enter into our atmosphere. These images at the bottom of the slide are representing the different systems that exist, especially in the United States, that are causing the most greenhouse gases to enter the atmosphere. What system is causing the most CO2 and other greenhouse gases to enter the atmosphere? It's 29%. Exactly right. Transportation. So our transportation systems, how we transport things in the United States, is estimated to be almost a third of the reason why there's this many greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. So you can see this image is showing you a semi truck. The ground transportation that we use to deliver goods across the country has a huge impact on the planet. And you know, I'm sure you've heard that like driving your car can emit different greenhouse, it emits CO2 into the atmosphere. And in the Bay Area, we're famous for the traffic, how many people are driving their own vehicle getting from place to place. So transportation systems are a major reason why there's this many greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And then you can see right after that is electricity generation. 28% of the greenhouse gases in our atmosphere are estimated to be assumed or emitted from electricity generation. What is that? Have you seen something like that? Yeah, that's like our power grid, right? The way that we reliably turn on and off lights throughout the day is a product of the fossil fuel industry. We burn fossil fuels to make the electricity that is in our homes. In San Mateo County, we have a little bit of a different energy mix that is trying to make it so that all of our electricity that we use in San Mateo County isn't reliant on fossil fuels, but in a lot of places in the United States and other cities and towns in California, electricity generation is a huge reason why there's this many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. After that, you can see industry, agriculture, commercial, residential. These are all systems that exist, especially in a developed country like the United States, that cause way too many greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, and others into the atmosphere. And remember, because the atmosphere functions like a bubble or a greenhouse, it is trapping those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. They don't just go away once we're done driving our car from place to place. It's much more than that. Industry, you can see that image is trying to make it look like a factory. What I think of is our systems of industry, like the way that we produce graphics cards, the way that we make new devices, the way that we make clothing in the fashion industry are made, like those processes, those systems that exist, and how we use those resources burns a lot of CO2 in the process. So these are both what the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere percentage and the systems that exist that excuse me. And so this is the amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases by percentage in our atmosphere, and then the systems that exist that contribute to those greenhouse gases staying in our atmosphere. you can see from this graph that over time, there's been a rapid increase of CO2 in our atmosphere. The CO2 levels today are higher than the levels recorded over the past 800,000 years. It's really hard for me to even think of that amount of time, 800,000 years. But you can see on this graph that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has gone up, gone down. It's fluctuated over time, right? You can see that with this part of the graph. And then something happens in 1950 that causes just a spike in CO2 that we haven't seen our planet recover from. In 1950, that was a time where people start talking more about consumer culture. World War II had just ended. A lot of people moved back home and needed jobs. They were ready to come back and hang out with their families. And there was technology advancements throughout the two wars that offered the opportunity for people to be able to own their own car, their own refrigerator. There was a lot more reasons to transport goods and services across the United States, a lot more electricity to generate and use in the home. And so we can speculate that since 1950, we've seen this spike in CO2 because of how technology has advanced and the people's relationship with the goods and services in the United States, like our consumer culture. So that amount of CO2 is it's not just like there's more of this greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. This amount of that greenhouse gas in the atmosphere is actually causing our planet to warm up too. This graph is showing you that the Earth has warmed up by an average of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius since 1880. Does anyone remember what happened in 1880, a historical event? There was a revolution of sorts. Exactly right. Yes. So the Industrial Revolution happened, and that's when another moment in history where technology advanced really quickly. And since 1880, we've seen the temperature increase on our planet. This is showing us a warning sign of what's to come. 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, right? I can hear that it's not even 2 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the big deal here? But if you think about our planet is a system. If you think about your body as a system, when your temperature goes up, even 2 degrees, what do we call that? Yes, a fever. And so when your body is having a fever, it's that system giving you an idea that something's not functioning the way it should be. When we see the temperature change on our planet, even by 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, that's the system giving us an indicator that something is not working, that something is changing. All right, so now let's go back to your workbook, and I want you to think about, or I want you to write down your thoughts for question 3. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to think about what might this mean for the planet? How do you think global warming is affecting our planet? No right or wrong answer, just what do you think? And I know this question says global warming, and so you can infer that global warming will affect our planet by warming up the globe or our planet. Think deeper than that. And then this is usually when I'd give students time to pause, think, write down. When I start seeing more, or I start hearing more chit chat, some sort of indicator that people are getting closer to done, I ask them to show me on their hands how many more minutes they need. And so if they need 5 minutes, 1 minute. And then we come together and I say, okay, great. Now that you've written down your thoughts, start talking about it with people nearby. How do you think global warming will impact our planet? Once they've done that a little bit and I hear conversations start to dwindle, I ask for I'll pick on table groups to share their thoughts. I can kind of go through what the conversation usually sounds like. So, okay, table group over here, what were you thinking? Exactly right. So as the planet warms up, we start to see less plants and animals that we used to be able to live in those temperatures. Exactly. Yeah, like the polar bears. Yes, we see more ice melting on our planet faster than expected. The land ice melting is a big problem. Yes, we see more wildfires. We've seen that happen closer to home in San Mateo County and in parts of California, right? We've seen more wildfires be able to start and burn faster. We'll talk more about that. So is it just ice, animals, fire? Does it impact us? Yeah. we'll talk more about it, but yes, it does impact humans a lot, and it's going to impact humans more in the future, which is why we're all talking about it today. So that way we're all on the same page about what it might look like and where there's opportunity to come together and create sustainable solutions that protect a lot more people. Okay, so with that, just make sure that you ask students to think about, like, it's not just plants, it's not just animals, it's not just polar bears. It's the whole planet. Anything that lives and relies on this planet is going to be impacted by global warming and climate change. This is how I transition to the next question. Is I say, okay, so there's a lot here, right? We talked about a lot of different things that are going to change as our planet warms up over time. A tool that I like using to help us keep focused when we're thinking about all these big problems is a triple bottom line analysis. A triple bottom line analysis is a framework that is like a table you can see here that helps us ask these questions, and we categorize our answers so that way we can see the full scope of the problem or solution. And we're thinking about it from 3 different perspectives, thinking about how the problem or solution will impact Earth's natural ecosystems or the environment. And then we go into the middle category where we're thinking about how this problem or solution can impact society, and is it fair and just for all that are a part of it. That's like kind of thinking about it from the equity perspective. And then finally, we would look at it from the economy perspective, thinking of how this problem or solution can impact wealth and resources. How is it going to impact the money we spend here in San Mateo County, in California, throughout the United States? This triple bottom line analysis will make way more sense when we actually do it for the problem we're looking at, which is biodiversity. So don't worry about it, but this is just a way to help us kind of navigate and categorize our thoughts, because there's going to be a lot of things to think about when we think about global warming and climate change impacting our planet. So I'm going to walk you through a triple bottom line analysis. You'll see that if you're looking at the student handout, question 4 is a blank triple bottom line analysis. I tell students to write at least 3 things per section. So you should have 9 items at the end of your triple bottom line analysis once I get through these slides. And again, this is like the triple bottom line analysis is just an excellent resource to think about the full scope of the problem and solution. You can do it for both. Right now we're looking at just the problem. Okay. So you can see from the slide here, and what we were talking about as you were thinking about how global warming is going to impact our planet, climate change is going to impact a lot of our different environments. We're going to see more wildfires, more drought, more high heat days, more extreme weather. And we'll also see how those extreme weather events where there's no water or a drought or like extremely high heat for a day is going to impact biodiversity, the variety of living things, like what's in this coral reef, the variety of color even in this photo is changing over time as the ocean absorbs more CO2 from the atmosphere and the temperature of the oceans are changing. We're seeing more habitat loss, like you mentioned with polar bears, but in other places that are traditionally covered in ice are becoming areas that are covered in water, and that's changing what can live there and how our planet functions with those in those ecosystems. We're also seeing tremendous sea level rise impacts, thinking about how if there's more land ice melting and being added to the ocean, and our oceans are taking up more space over time with thermal expansion, sea levels are naturally rising faster than expected, and that's impacting places close to the coast like San Mateo County. And it's also impacting us. You can see in this public health image, does this air look like something you'd want to breathe? Exactly. So that we see public health impacts when clean air, clean water are not available to people. So I want you to write down at least 3 of these, 3 things that matter to you, maybe things that you've seen in your life you're concerned about for the future. Once you have that, we'll move on. Obviously, naturally, you would pause more for students here. Alrighty. So now that we've talked about how climate change impacts our environment, we're going to move on and see how climate change now in that middle column affects society. When we're thinking about how it impacts society for me means people. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how climate change is going to impact human health. This is a graphic that the CDC made, and we know a lot more about the CDC and the work that they do after the COVID-19 pandemic. But their resources on this, on one part of their webpage is really talking about climate change and the impacts that we see from climate change and how that's going to impact human health. So although this graph is hard to navigate, I recommend that you start here in the middle and look at the impacts of climate change as they are right now. We've talked about like rising temperatures, more extreme weather, rising sea levels, increased CO2. And so we've been spending a little bit more time talking about the increased CO2 levels in this presentation so far. So let's look at this part here. So as there's more CO2 in our atmosphere, as that level is increasing, we see more environmental degradation and water and food supply impacts. Degradation, environmental degradation, so it's like a grade and it's degrading over time. Is that positive or negative? Vote with your thumb. Degradation, if we're degrading, it's negative, right? So as our environments degrade or lose value over time, we see more forced migration. People, plants, and animals have to leave those areas because there isn't a thriving environment for them. And then there's more civil conflict because when people leave those places and show up somewhere else, probably where other people live, the people that live there are frustrated. They're mad that like someone thought that this was a place that now they can come in and move into when they're already settled. That creates a lot of civil conflict. And then there's mental health impacts that are associated with this too. It's hard to process this information and create a safe space where you know you'll be safe as you're watching the environment degrade around you. Okay, cool. Another impact that we see as there's increased CO2 levels is there's water and food supply impacts. As CO2 levels continue to increase on our planet, it's changing what the quality of water and food, and we need to have high quality food and water so that we're all able to survive. And the supply chain is impacted significantly as the CO2 levels on our planet change and increase. When there is less food and water, we see more malnutrition and diarrheal diseases. It's a huge impact of like extreme weather events now to see like water quality change rapidly. Other things to look at here that you can add to your triple bottom line analysis, thinking about like when there's rising temperatures on our planet, we see more extreme heat and more severe weather. This is hyper relevant to the 2023 winter time and now summer. In the winter, we saw extreme weather events like extreme storms where atmospheric rivers were touching down. And during those weather events, we saw more injuries, more fatalities, and the mental health impacts of it raining for 3 months. If people remember, you can pull on that. And then when there's more extreme heat, then we see more heat-related illness and death, which means that there's more people getting heat stroke or their hearts aren't able to keep up with the temperature because like I said, or like you all know, right? When you get a fever, your body's telling you something's wrong. And if the extreme heat is causing that temperature increase in your body, then there's lots of other impacts there. So I'll give you a moment to navigate this slide. Again, you can pick something from the middle that resonates, but how I would complete this the triple bottom line analysis for the society and equity section, I would say air pollution causes more asthma, or increased allergens from sea level rise cause more respiratory allergies and asthma. As sea levels rise, we see water quality impacts like cholera and other harmful algal blooms. Students will need a lot of help navigating this, especially younger students. So just give them time, space, sentence starters, all that good stuff. So thinking about how climate change is going to impact society and equity, climate change also drives inequities. What I'm talking about with this is that climate change doesn't impact everyone exactly the same, no matter where you are on the planet, in the state, in San Mateo County. Climate change is going to impact you differently depending on where you are. Climate change is not doing this equitably either. And you can see on this slide here, so this is showing like people protesting, saying that the poor will be hit first and hardest. And that idea we see happening all over our planet. This is an island nation in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Kiribati. There's Kiribati is a bunch of little islands as one country. There's islands in Kiribati that are no longer habitable, which means that people had to leave those places because they were going underwater due to sea level rise. The island nation of Kiribati is not financially developed like the United States. There's no way that they are contributing that many fossil fuels and burning that many fossil fuels to have this be the impact that they're seeing in the area. So they are a relatively poorer nation than the United States. In a developing country, and this developing country is now having to move away because of sea level rise. That's not equitable. That doesn't incorporate equity into the process. So climate change is not, it doesn't impact everyone exactly the same, and it's not fair that happens. And sometimes, and more often than not, poorer nations or poorer people will be hit first and worst with climate change's impact. People are aware of this phenomena, and there's a concept called environmental justice that's helping to address this issue. The Environmental Protection Agency of the United States put out a definition of environmental justice, and the work that component of the federal government works on. They define environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, income, or age, in the process of improving and maintaining a clean and healthful environment. So they're saying that it's not fair that climate change impacts people differently, but what we can do to address this is make sure that everyone has a solution. Everyone's a part of the solution to addressing environmental justice issues. So when we're talking about equity, we can think about it in fairness, and understanding what is fair and just when solving problems, like how climate change is impacting different people. Okay, another slide. Sometimes I use this, sometimes this video, we have time for it, but this is just an alternative way to describe that. So now we're moving on to our next section and our final section of the triple bottom line analysis, thinking about how climate change impacts our economy. So just like we were talking about before, the countries that are least responsible for the global emissions suffer the worst climate impacts. Places that are on the equator, where it's already relatively warm on our planet, are seeing the impacts of climate change and the higher temperature much more than we do in the United States. And that has a lot to do with just like the regional location. They're not able to have so much industry, have so much electricity be generated, and have transportation systems exist like we do in the United States. And that's changing how their economy functions. And a lot of that has more to do with the temperature change increase on our planet. If it's too hot, then you can't go to work. The machines don't work. And so the industry evolution and like who's able to live in these areas and withstand time as temperature increases is changing. This graphic up here is showing the global warming culprits, who's responsible for the most CO2 emissions. CO2 is carbon dioxide. You can see the countries that are bloated or like extra like stretched out compared to the shape that you know and would recognize on a regular map are the ones that are most responsible for the amount of CO2 or carbon dioxide being added to our atmosphere. All right. And so you can see in the United States here, we're like our country is bloated, representing that we are one of the major culprits. China technically at the moment in 2023 releases more CO2 per year into the atmosphere, but the United States has been doing that for the longest amount of time. So we're the longest over time contributor, and I think that's more worth measuring when we're thinking about like how long carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases stay in our atmosphere. So this is just demonstrating that the United States is really one of the main culprits, is most responsible for the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere that's causing all these impacts to change. And we're seeing the impacts here less intensely than other parts of the country, like Kiribati, where they're having to move from the country that they live on, that they live in, and the islands they live on because of climate change. Another kind of component of this, if students are searching, we talk about like food supply, like how avocados are really expensive if they're hard to grow for a season. Strawberries were really difficult to harvest during the extreme weather we had earlier this year, and they were more expensive or not available. That's a good example to walk students through. Another one is like supply chain issues. We saw major supply chain issues happen during the pandemic, where parts of the world that usually were a resource for wood and like the things we used to build didn't have that available because of supply chain issues. And that impacted how we could go through construction projects, what we were able to develop during the pandemic and build. And that will just get worse as there's more wildfires on our planet, like globally. Like if the forests are burning, then we will have less wood to build. Another one I talk about here is like asking students if they've ever purchased something or got something delivered from Amazon. Have they ever run into where there's been shipping delays for some reason or another? That's going to get worse as climate change impacts our economy more over time. The things that used to be available and easy to ship to you from other parts of the world are going to take longer to ship or might change in their availability. So they might become more expensive if they're hard to get, or they might not be available at all. And that will impact both the global economy of how we spend money and have things sent to us, but also our local economy too. All right, usually this is a good point to stand up and take a stretch break. I'm gonna keep going through it, shifting gears. All right, so students will need a moment to like think about like, okay, I need to stand up, I need to stretch. This is a big global problem. And now I'm going, so give them a stretch break if you can, or at least like 30 seconds to stand up and go talk to a friend. Whew, okay, I'm just gonna stretch as it turns out. All right, so now we're back and we're going to talk about how climate change is going to impact San Mateo County, where you live. Remember your Daly City, this is where I'm pretending to do my presentation apparently, is a city that's inside San Mateo County. Everyone that's in San Mateo County is going to be impacted by climate change. We're seeing these impacts more specifically here where we live. Remember that you are using the student handout. Sometimes this is like the second presentation too. Like we've gone through a lot and we're going to do the second presentation. So I'm reminding students that this is the second time I've seen them to pull out the student handbook handout wherever that went. All right, hold on one sec. Okay, so cool. So everyone should have a pencil out if they're writing it down physically, or they have their student handout open and they're following along. If you have questions or need more time, just let me know. Remember, these are our goals by the end of the week, by the end of the time that we spend together. We'll be able to navigate climate change's impact on San Mateo County, how climate change impacts biodiversity, and what solutions we can work on together to make a positive change for both the planet and all the living and non-living things here. All right. Sometimes I do this with students, especially if the teacher's into it. I ask students to make climate change memes. This is like the first thing you can do as students if you want to like just break the ice and have something fun to do. It's helpful when students can send it to the teacher to confirm that they're done with the activity, and then we look at them on the shared screen together. Teachers sometimes also do this as a homework assignment, like take what you learned today and make a meme out of it. And it's just fun to do. There's meme generators on Google search that I use. IMG FLP. IMG FLP is the first one, I think, when you Google search it. And students are able to pick from a bunch of different memes that are funny to them. And then I ask for them to make one that talks about climate change, global warming, biodiversity, yada, yada. So this is the one I made. And then it's fun for students to get to share and show. And we talk about like how, like there's a lot that you can communicate in a meme. Memes are more often meant to be funny and silly and kind of just like comment on the nonsense of it all. And many of your memes are commenting on how we're not really doing anything. Like, yes, we learned a lot. And now we just kind of accept the reality, like watching it burn all around us kind of thing. Like, this is fine. So yeah, it's important to know that like memes are an impactful way to communicate, but really a way to share more education and awareness is to have conversations with people. Maybe use a meme as a starting point. Oh yeah, here's the instructions. Google search, meme generator, and then IMG flip is the one you'll find. Cool. Okay, thinking about the local impacts of climate change in San Mateo County. I would like encourage sharing. I think I said that already, but please have students share. It's fun to like see what they make and gives you a good sense of what they remember from the last presentation if you're doing this as a recall activity, or just gives you a good sense of what they already know about, like when we're talking about ice caps melting, or what do students usually talk about, like wildfire, or not sorting their trash correctly. They're really good about and can see that that's not going well. So yeah. All right, thanks for sharing your memes. Now we're gonna come back, we're plugging back into what we were talking about with climate change and zooming in on how it's going to impact us locally in San Mateo County where you live or go to school in. Yeah. Remember, we're talking about biodiversity too. And so with these impacts, we can assume that it's going to change the variety of life or the biodiversity in this area too. So you can see in question 5, there's like 2 facts I want you to hold on to per slide. I'll try to highlight what those facts are, but you can also write in your own words what's relevant to you. All right, so the first climate impact that we're seeing in San Mateo County is temperature change. This graph is showing you that in San Mateo County, the temperature has increased by 1.8 degrees Celsius, represented by this black line on the slide. This is higher than the average for the United States as a whole, but the United States, you can see, is represented in this orange line. The temperature change for the United States annually has gone up by 1 degree Celsius. It's doubled or almost doubled in San Mateo County. So the temperature increase in San Mateo County has gone up higher than the US average. That's fact 1. And then fact 2, what I would write down is San Mateo County's temperature increase has a lot to do with the amount of fog in the area. We call this phenomenon fog reduction. Fog reduction is causing San Mateo County's temperature to increase higher than the average for the United States. This graph is showing you the annual temperature change between 1995, 15 years after the Industrial Revolution, to 2018. This is Washington Post data. So there you go. Your 2 facts from this slide is that the temperature, the annual temperature is higher in San Mateo County than the US average. And the temperature increase in San Mateo County has a lot to do with the amount of fog and fog reduction in the area. Places like Half Moon Bay, the San Francisco, like those areas are famous for their fog. And believe it or not, there's less fog there than there was years ago. Like even thinking of like 30 years ago, there's less fog in that area. I know it's foggy when you go out and visit, but there is supposed to be a lot more fog in that area, and that changes the temperature. Oh yes, here we go. And then I have the facts written down here. I usually give students a little bit of time to look at them. Sometimes it's helpful to have, like, you hear it from me, you see the visual, you know what to write in question 5. All right, another impact of climate change that we're seeing in San Mateo County is extreme weather in the form of high heat. When we see extreme weather, there's variation with that, but specifically this slide is talking about high heat days. So the first fact I would write is a high heat day is a day where it's over 100 degrees. That's like the benchmark of measuring it, days that it's over 100 degrees. In San Mateo County, you can see what we saw historically in the year 1995 that we saw, that's in this graph on the left here. In 1995, there were 13 high heat days. And on those high heat days, you can see not every San Mateo County resident was impacted by high heat, just the ones that have the orange. And I think there's just a couple of red dots on the screen. So you can see a lot of orange here near this is Pescadero. This is Half Moon Bay. If you drive down the coast of San Mateo County through Pescadero, that's the area that was experiencing the most high heat, as well as places in East Palo Alto area and just south of Woodside. All right, so with that information, we're predicting, or with how high heat days are going, we have information that we're using to predict high heat days in the future. You can see that we're predicting by the year 2030 that there will be up to 21 high heat days. If those high heat days happen all at the same time, that would be 3 weeks of high heat. And you can see more people in these areas being impacted. Like this is Pescadero down here again, south of Half Moon Bay on the water. And you can see that there's more high heat days happening in this area. And then a lot more people in the Redwood City, East Palo Alto area are going to be impacted as well. And then by 2070, we're expecting even more high heat days, up to 35. And you can see a significant amount of San Mateo County residents are going to be impacted, those reflected in the orange and red dots. Way more people that live facing the San Francisco Bay in San Mateo, Foster City, Redwood City, East Palo Alto are going to be impacted by high heat. Where you all are in Daly City, pretending, you'll see that Daly City is not going to experience high heat days. It's not predicted that there will be high heat days here. That just further demonstrates that climate change is not fair. It's not equitable. It doesn't impact everyone exactly the same, even though you all live in the same county. So no, just recognizing and understanding that climate change is going to impact different places in San Mateo County where we live differently. And that's not fair, but everyone deserves to have the resources they need to be better suited or to be protected and safe during high heat days like this. All right, these are the two facts. High heat days are days when it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And not everyone in San Mateo County will experience high heat days. Climate change is not fair and does not impact everyone exactly the same. Those are the two facts I have students write down from that slide. All right, another form of extreme weather we have to talk about is precipitation. In February 2023, I gathered this data looking at the drought, like what the severity of the drought was after the extreme storms we had from December till February. We have de-escalated the drought in San Mateo County, or declassified it to a moderate drought. And moderate drought still says like 100% of San Mateo County is in a moderate drought, where there's it's significantly drier. Landscapes and gardens need irrigation earlier in the year, and wildlife patterns begin to change, which is impacting the variety of life for the living things in the area. You can see that this is also like another way to think about what we're talking about with extreme weather, with these two benchmarks on this side of the slide. In 2022, it was the fourth wettest December on record over the past 128 years. Fourth wettest. And the same year, 2022, was the 25th driest year to date over the past 128 years. Having a significantly dry year and a significantly wet December in the same calendar year is not normal. That's a clear demonstration to me that there's extreme weather events happening, and that's being brought into like San Mateo County because of climate change. So this slide is talking about precipitation as an extreme weather, but we've also seen that there's drought. That's a huge problem here. So it's thinking about extreme weather, precipitation, and drought. How the amount of water that comes from the sky in San Mateo County, how that's impacting things. So these are the two facts that I would recommend. Even though it's rained a lot this winter, San Mateo County is still in a moderate drought. As of February 2023, it rained a lot over December into January and February of that 2022 into 2023. And then December 2022 was the fourth wettest or 25th driest winter in California compared to the last 128 years. So letting them like kind of sit with that data, understand that fact. All right, we have just a few more ways that climate change is impacting San Mateo County. Another impact that we're seeing is increased wildfire risk. In San Mateo County, it's predicted that this area in dark red on the screen has a 60% chance of burning between now and 2070. That has a lot to do with how dry the area is, the normal wind patterns that we see, and how high the temperature we're predicting will be during the summertime, and the things that cause wildfires to happen. Although this is not guaranteed, this is just what we're predicting, and it's important to continue to revisit this data and information because we need to make sure that the people that live in this area are safe, that there's time to evacuate for people to go to another safe spot. You saw the day that the sky turned orange a few years ago now, and it's an important thing to remember that when wildfires burn, they're also emitting CO2 into the atmosphere and changing the air quality with all that smoke. And so as we see more wildfire risk, or like a higher chance of things burning in San Mateo County, we can expect to see more of the impacts of wildfire, like the sky changing color, us having to wear masks to go outside, and the variety of life in this area changing if there's a wildfire that's going to break out. So wildfire risk is talking about the chance that a place might burn if there is a fire. We are not guaranteeing any area in San Mateo County will catch on fire, but assessing risk. And there are parts of San Mateo County with a 60% chance of burning between now and 2070. 60% chance is just something to be aware of, so that we were better protected and have good emergency plans for the people that live in those areas. All right, so finally, thinking about how climate change is impacting San Mateo County. San Mateo County has the most to lose to sea level rise and erosion. An impact of sea level rise is erosion, and we see more erosion rates happening on the Pacific Ocean side of San Mateo County. Places like Half Moon Bay, Pacifica are seeing a lot more erosion than other parts of San Mateo County. When we're talking about just other sea level rise impacts, that looks like flooding, and that might be temporary or permanent flooding that happens more so on the San Francisco Bay side of San Mateo County, like where the airport, Foster City, and East Palo Alto are. The areas in San Mateo County potentially impacted by flooding could expect to see 3.3 to 4 feet of sea level rise by the year 2100. 3.3 feet, so that's like a yardstick, right? If I have a yardstick in the classroom, I'll use it now to show people, like, water doesn't stand up nice and tall like this, but this is about how much extra water we're expecting to see in San Mateo County, which will flood a lot of people, industry, and resources we all rely on in San Mateo County on this side of the county. You can see places like the San Francisco airport. You've probably been there, or have someone that works there, or waiting for a package to be delivered there and then driven to your house. A lot of people, like I use Highway 101 to get to and from work. And I wouldn't be able to use Highway 101 in the year 2100 because it's expected to be underwater. Other people use Caltrain and other alternative transportation resources like BART. Those are expected to be underwater as well. And there's places that are essential for bird migration, like Coyote Point, Bear Island Wetlands, Cooley Landing, that are natural places that birds and plants and animals need as a place to find food and find shelter. Those are expected to be underwater, as well as some essential resources that we all need, like our wastewater treatment plants. These are wastewater treatment plants in these circles. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 9 in San Mateo County that are predicted to be underwater by the year 2100, with just an extra 3 feet of sea level rise in the area. We know about all of this. There's time to plan, and there's been good infrastructure planning that people are coming together to do together. So people are coming together to create solutions so that way by the year 2100, we're better built and better adapted to sea level rise. So I don't mean to share this information to alarm anyone. This idea here with this slide is that we know sea level rise is happening because of the temperature change and how much more space our oceans are taking up on our planet. And we're doing what we can to adapt to sea level rise, be better protected if we can see like this estimated amount of sea level rise coming our way. All right, so the two facts I want you to take away from that last slide are, no matter what, we know that there will be at least 3.3 feet of sea level rise in San Mateo County by the year 2100, and many different essential resources will flood by the year 2100 if we do nothing, like the airport, parts of Highway 101, some of the wastewater treatment plants in the area, wetlands, homes, and businesses, some schools and hospitals, like other infrastructure that we need to. So knowing that that's the amount of sea level rise, we know we can also see what might flood. So now I want you to take a moment for question 6 and reflect on, have you seen or experienced climate change's impact in San Mateo County? Students often spend more meaningful time talking to each other about this. So what I tell them to do is like talk about it with someone and take notes in your question 6. And then once they've done that and I see conversation kind of shifting, losing interest, or whatever that might be, the students share out. I ask for table groups to share with me. Cool. Sorry, my cat is really excited that we're sitting here. Okay, so this is like the final component of it. We talk about what biodiversity is now. Now that we know the climate change information, we talk about like what biodiversity means. And in this section is kind of where we're bringing it all together, framing it for their field trip that they're going to go on. All right, so now thinking about question 7, we're going to be talking a lot more about the biodiversity. So why are we using this word? Biodiversity is defined as an environmental indicator that is indicated by abundance/richness, or the numbers of different species of plants and animals in a specific area. So biological diversity is an environmental term, is indicated by the abundance or richness, the numbers of different species of plants and animals in a specific area. You've heard me describe it already throughout the presentation as the variety of life. I asked students to like pull apart, what does bio mean? What is like biology if we're like struggling? The study of life. And so like bio means life, diversity means variety. To have a diverse group is a varietous group. So biodiversity is the variety of life. So now that we know what the word means, I want you to think about, what does diversity mean to you? Why do you think we are talking about biodiversity today? Where is their value in the variety of life? Talk about with someone nearby and then write it down in question 7. Cool. Again, I would do the share out situation and like, what does biodiversity mean to you? And someone would say like lots of different colors when I go outside. And I say, yes, even like the color green, like there's a variety of what that color green looks like in the places that we walk to and from all the time, right? Not every tree has the exact same green leaves. Seeing a variety of green makes us feel good. It makes me happy when I see that, at least. And then it demonstrates that there's a variety, not just one thing. Yeah, some students sometimes get to a spot where they're talking about diversity as like, they like having a lot of different stories to learn from, or a lot of different people that add new information to the way that they understand the world around them. And we talk about like diversity, like in the tide pools and food webs, right? We want like a variety of what to eat. We want a variety of other species to interact with, and that creates balance in an ecosystem. Cool. Okay. So I think that's usually where students go with it. And then we talk about a bio blitz, because that's the thing we're going to go do on the field trip, is a bio blitz activity. So when we're talking about the variety of life, sometimes it's hard to capture exactly all the unique and different living things on our planet. There's events that happen nowadays to recognize that we need to see what's around us, and we want to try to capture all of it in a way that's efficient for us to learn a lot at one time. So BioBlitz is an event that focuses on finding and identifying as many species as possible in a specific area over a short period of time to help understand biodiversity. And you're usually using tools and resources that help add that information to a community science database. So it's not just you understanding the variety of life or biodiversity in an area, but you're also sharing that on an app that we'll talk about. So if you're wondering like, oh, I just learned about BioBlitz, am I allowed to? Of course you are. Anyone can BioBlitz: students, teachers, park rangers, scientists, people who like to cook, software engineers, everyone is welcome to BioBlitz. All you need to BioBlitz in the way that we're going to do it is smartphone or a camera and a computer. And we're going to be, what the most essential part of a BioBlitz is making observations. When you are observing, you're using one of your 5 senses to help you understand the world around you. Hold on one second. When you're making observations, oh no. Okay, took a quick break, but this is what observations are. When we're talking about observations, it's the things that you need your 5 senses to make to better understand the world around you. What you will be doing for the BioBlitz is maybe using something that you can see, you can hear, you smell, ideally not things that you can taste, but also stuff that you can touch. And you'll document that observation using a tool like your phone. And when you take a photo of it, it captures who you are, what you saw, where you were, when you saw it, and the evidence of it with that photo. We're going to be using iNaturalist or Seek for this activity, so that way you're able to send that information to a community science database. So the next time you see me, we're going to be doing a field trip and BioBlitz activity. The field trip will be at the place that you have organized with the teacher, and the BioBlitz will be a structured hour usually of just taking photos of all the living things around after a refresher of how to use the app. The teacher will tell you if you're supposed to be using Seek or iNaturalist just based off of the student interest and like where their accessibility is. And there's lots of ways to work around this. What I usually say for the field trip is that you must wear closed-toed shoes, bring an extra layer of clothing, if not more, and bring your phone. Make sure it's charged if you're going to use it for the activity, or buddy up with someone that has a phone and is able to use it for the activity, and bring food and water. So we're going on a field trip. You need to bring those basics to participate, and you are not allowed on the bus unless you wear closed-toed shoes, just like basic liability thing. So that's what I say. And then to wrap up the activity or the session in the classroom, I ask for students to pause and reflect on, after learning more about climate change and biodiversity, add to question 10 something you found interesting, surprising, or motivating. And students go from there. Oh, yes. Okay. So after they've reflected and like, oh, yes, I found it surprising that there's going to be 3 feet of sea level rise no matter what. I found it interesting that there's been a lot of things that are not fair for everyone, and climate change is impacting people differently. I find it motivating to know that we can think about this information ahead of time and work together to talk about it. And then I tell students that the choices that they make count. We think about like the individual behaviors, the sphere of influence we have. And when people around us see us making choices to turn off the lights, picking up litter, shopping locally and in season, if you're able to, or eating less meat, if you can change your diet that way, the choices we make are seen by the people that care about us, and we start seeing a broader impact when those people also like get interested and want to see those changes happen too. So although it might feel small, the changes that you make really count, and who you in your sphere of influence, who's naturally watching you and cares about what you're doing, will change over time too. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. If you have questions, you can reach out to the instructor, and we'll see you all at the field trip. So that's the presentation that I usually do for this. It usually takes at least 2 class period sessions, and I kind of find a good spot to stop. The biodiversity part of it, I end up reviewing at the beginning of the field trip, along with how to use the app and doing like a little demo. I'll link to the slide deck where I've given teachers an opportunity to like introduce their students to the Seek app specifically through iNaturalist before I see them again for the field trip. But that's the idea. 2 classroom sessions using the slide deck and then a field trip. Thanks for watching.